Welcome to the Shameless Plug, a podcast about climate, energy, and most of all, about electrification. It's a new podcast hosted by me, Saul Griffith, and my mate, Fiona Whitelaw, and we're going to get to the nuts and bolts of electrifying your life. Today, I'm delighted to have an old friend, Daniel Bleakley, come and talk about electric vehicles and electric trucking. Daniel's a little bit famous on the internet for starting a YouTube series known as Coal Miners Driving Teslas, basically putting giant smiles on the face of coal miners in the interest of changing the culture war around electric vehicles. And he's going to be here today to tell us a little bit about how electric vehicles are playing out in Australia, and even more exciting, what he's up to next in terms of electrifying trucking, one of the heaviest emitters in our economy. Welcome to another episode of the Shameless Plug podcast. I'm Saul Griffith. I'm here with my mate Fiona, and today we are delighted to talk to an extremely good communicator, and I guess now an almost long-time friend of mine, Daniel Bleakley. I was actually on one of his podcasts a couple of years ago, hooning around in a Tesla Model 3 with him. And it's a delight to have him back to talk about all things electric vehicles. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Saul. Yeah, it's good to see you again, and looking forward to another really interesting conversation.
Just to kick it off, as a storyteller, I'm actually interested in, where did you come from? How did you become concerned about climate? Are you concerned about climate? And why did you choose to kind of become an EV guy? And, what's your journey there?
My journey, I started in Central Queensland. So I was actually born in Mackay, up probably 1,000 kilometres north of Brisbane.
Coal country.
Coal country, yeah. So my family actually moved out to a little town called Clermont, which is about 300 kilometres west of Mackay, when I was about 2 years old. And the reason that we moved out there is because my father was setting up a petrol station in Clermont. So my uncle actually owns a diesel distribution company in Mackay, and then my father moved out to Clermont when I was 2 years old and set up a petrol station out there. And my parents are actually still running that today. And they have a couple of trucks, and they have a service station, and then they also deliver diesel out to all the farms in the area. And there's also a very strong coal mining community in the town as well. So I'm sure some of your listeners, your Australian listeners, are probably familiar with the Adani mine. Clermont, where I grew up, is the closest town to the Adani mine.
So fossil fuel is nearly in your blood.
Yes, yeah. So it's a very hydrocarbon intense area, and it's a lovely little town, very strong community. Local rugby league team is very highly respected by everyone in the town, and I think around a third of the people who live in the town work in the coal mining industry. So it's very influential, and even all the like our football fields, the local swimming pool, a lot of that stuff was built by Rio Tinto back in the 80s. So it had a big impact on the town as well. So yeah, I grew up there, and then I studied engineering at QUT in Brisbane. And I also did a year exchange program to Germany when I was 18, which was a really amazing experience. And it was then when I started to see all these wind farms and all the solar panels that were going up on German houses back in 2000, when the German government actually had an incentive to pay 4 times. If you put solar panels on your roof, the government would pay you 4 times what it would cost you to put it back into the grid. So there was a huge boom in solar in the 2000s in Germany. And I kind of came back from Germany the following year, looking around and not seeing much movement at all. Studied engineering, and then in 2005 I read...
Which flavour of engineering?
Mechanical, yeah. And I graduated in 2005, and in 2005 I also read an amazing book called The Weathermakers by Tim Flannery, who I believe
He's
lives
my
not
neighbour
far
now.
from you. He's your
Yep.
neighbour, yeah. And that had a huge impact on me because that was the moment I kind of realised, or that book really opened my eyes to how huge this problem is, and that really got me interested initially, and then over the next decade or so, I followed climate science. I followed the politics of climate in Australia, and like a lot of your listeners as well, watched how um, governments were government after government was unable to take any strong measures, and we went, lived through the Abbott years when any shred of climate policy got torn down, and then in 2019, after a lot of the new reporting was coming out about how fast climate change was accelerating, I actually decided to become an activist. And I joined Extinction Rebellion. I was living in Melbourne at the time. And
Melbourne will turn anyone into a radical.
that's right. Yeah, so I met some amazing people in Extinction Rebellion, and then started being involved in some of these actions where we would block roads in Melbourne. There were police arrests and all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of 2019, I decided to do a hunger strike on the steps of Victoria's Parliament House. So I did. I went for 10 days, and I sat on the steps each day, and I had a chalkboard, and had people coming up and chatting to me and interviewing me, and that ended up getting quite a lot of media, and I was interviewed on a few radio channels and whatnot. So that kind of gave me a bit of a platform to talk about it. And then the month after that, I glued my hand to Siemens' office window in Docklands in Melbourne to protest their involvement in the Adani mine, which is where I'm from. And that also got a lot of media. And the reason we had targeted Siemens was because they were one of three companies that had the capability to develop the signaling for the rail line to the Adani mine. So they were one of the key companies that were enabling the Adani mine project. So that was another big action that then kind of got picked up in Germany, and a whole bunch of Extinction Rebellion activists in Germany continued that against Siemens headquarters, and that turned into, kind of snowballed into a relatively large action over there. And then obviously COVID hit after that, and then a couple of years later, I had bought a Tesla Model 3 that year as well, and a couple of years later in 2021, I was back home visiting my family in Central Queensland with the Tesla, and that's when we started Coal Miners Driving Teslas, which I'm happy to chat about.
What was more controversial with your mum, the electric vehicle, given that she owns a petrol station, or gluing your hand to a window?
I think the getting arrested was a bit more concerning at that stage, and my mum's actually in the series. So just for your listeners, went back to Claremont. My brother was working in a coal mine at that time, and he took the Tesla over to Saraji coal mine in Dysart, which is about an hour away. And I said, if you take any of your mates for a drive, make sure you record their reactions. And so they'd finished a night shift, and there was a group of them, and he took them out for their first drive. And it's a Tesla Model 3 Performance. As you know, Saul, it does 0 to 100 in 3.3 seconds, and it's faster than pretty much anything else on the road. And Tim put one of his mates in the driver's seat, didn't tell him how fast it was, and they drove out to a quiet road. and then he just got him to floor it from 0 to 100. And the reaction video that he sent through, I looked at it and I thought, wow, this is huge. This is an incredible way of communicating some of the huge benefits of clean technology.
So, this is kind of going back home for you. And I'm curious about two things. The first thing is I'm curious about, like, how was it going back home after you've been, doing these things in Melbourne, and you're literally going back to a community where so many people are employed in this industry. And, I live in a small town. I kind of know how these things can roll. So how was that? And then also, what are these miners driving? Tell me also what their cars are like.
Yeah, it's a great question. And yeah, absolutely. Like the years leading up to that, I had been posting a lot about, shutting down coal, or the need to shut down coal and the need to move away from fossil fuels quite aggressively on social media. And obviously all the people I grew up with would see those posts. And I got into quite a few, anger-fueled social media arguments with people that I grew up with. So there was definitely a lot of tension there, because, take it from their side, I'm basically saying, you should shut down the industry that you've worked in all your life and that's supporting your family. So yeah, huge amount of tension in that, and even within my own family as well. So it was quite a stressful thing. And I think that's why with coal miners in Teslas, I immediately jumped on it, because it was as you said, Saul, it's a reframing of the whole narrative about we're not taking something away. This is a new, this is a better future to work, to move towards. And so, but I think out there as well, to your question about what kind of cars they drive, I mean, a lot of these guys, and mostly guys that we're talking, they work in the mining industry. They're like diesel fitters or boiler makers, and they're highly skilled at tearing down really complex engines and rebuilding them, and doing machining and welding and all that kind of stuff. And so a lot of them build their own cars or rebuild old V8s and stuff like that. And it's really impressive, some of the stuff that they do. And so because of that, they also have a respect for really good engineering, and they have a respect for brute force and acceleration. And so I think that was what really made it compelling, was that these guys just love the engineering and the speed of it all. Yeah.
I read your article about the British electric vehicles and about your family connection to that. I thought, that's bloody interesting. And you didn't know about this at all. Could I just get you to give us like a potted description of what that is about? That's so fascinating.
Yeah, that was a really mind-blowing thing that kind of happened to us as a family, I guess. Going back, so my father's originally from Perth, and so my grandparents on my father's side were from Perth, and they passed away around 16 years ago. And my grandfather, his father, so my great-grandfather, left the family when my grandfather was like 2 or 3 years old, when he was still an infant. So he never knew anything about his father's side of the family. And then in 2012, a researcher from Perth was walking up at Kings Park, which is a big park there in Perth. And in Kings Park, there's rows of trees that have the names of fallen soldiers from the First World War. And she saw 2 trees side by side that both had the Bleakley name. And she decided to research it. And so she got into the World War I kind of archives and found out that it was these 2 brothers who had been killed in the First World War in the Battle of the Somme in France. And their third brother, James, who had also fought in the war, had landed at Gallipoli. He was then sent home back to Perth because his brothers had been killed. And he was my great grandfather, and he was so. We found this out in 2012, and it blew us. It blew our minds. It was amazing for the family to hear this research. And my grandfather was actually named after the two uncles who died, and he never knew that.
He didn't know, right?
No, he never knew all that. Right. And so this researcher had written this blog post with all these letters and everything that she'd found, and it was quite amazing. This is back in 2012. And then last year, I just was sending the link around to the family on Anzac Day just to say how amazing this was, that this happened, and just refreshing everyone's memory of it. And my auntie, who lives in southern WA, she mentioned that this genealogist had reached out to her through ancestry.com or whatever that's called, and had suggested to her that James's father, William Bleakley, was one of three founders of a company called British Electric Vehicles in 1916. And so I then got in touch with this guy, and we had a video conference. And so there's two guys in the UK. One's a genealogist. The other one is a self-proclaimed narrow gauge. Is he the
railway?
Yes.
the narrow gauge. That's what got me in your post, was that this guy is like, it said, "Hey, introduce yourself," and he says, "I am a narrow gauge railway enthusiast." Yeah. That is not the starting of like the best, I don't know, dating profile or something ever. That was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so he as you say, he's a narrow gauge railway enthusiast, and he writes about the history of these old vehicles. And he actually has, so British Electric Vehicles has it had a few models. One was a small truck, so electric truck. They call it a truck, but it's basically
this is like Ford Model T-U. Is that kind of what we're thinking?
Well, no, not even that. So it's almost like a stand on. So that it's a platform, an electric platform that you would stand on the front or on the back, and then there would be a load of a couple of tons on the platform. So not even a cab or anything like that. And they were used in like factories and quarries and tunnels. So they were used on the London Metro. And they had a few different models. So they had some tired models, but they also had these narrow gauge rail models. So they were like trains, but they had batteries. So
lead acid, I assume.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. But if you look at the article, these guys had also found all this material, and they'd found like marketing brochures and photographs and all this kind of stuff. And in the marketing material, they're bragging about the lower cost of electric trucks versus petrol trucks or the horse. So they're comparing it to like horse and carriage, petrol, or these little electric trucks.
I'm working on a project that I call the shitless horse. It's an electric motorcycle.
Okay.
But I think that's one of the things you got to compare if you're comparing an electric vehicle to a horse is, the waste.
Exactly. No, zero waste.
Because there were two things happening. If you said that was 1916, so that was when cities, New York and London, were worried that they were going to be, they're like, if we continue horse use at the current rate, we're going to be buried in, I think it was 4 feet of shit by the year 2000 or something. And I remember those articles from that era. And then I also have these great advertising articles from the early 1910s that were like, buy an electric car for your wife for Christmas. They're, economic and it's the future we didn't quite take at that moment, but we're coming back.
And that raises the question, why, right? Like there was so much hype around them. People wanted them, and there was articles, as you say, about how good they were, and there was articles about that surfaced around British electric vehicles around, getting rid of the noise and the pollution of petrol cars. This is back in the early 1900s, and then for some reason the world turned towards internal combustion engine. And I'm keen to hear your thoughts.
Let's blame the Germans, like Daimler and Otto and Mercedes Benz.
Do you think that's what it is?
No, I don't know. I guess we just didn't, in the competition between diesel and batteries, we just weren't fast enough on batteries. Is that what happened?
No, I was just going to say, I think it actually had a lot to do with the development of the fossil fuel industry at the time. That's my guess, because if you look at all of the stuff that was going on back then, and I'm so not a historian, so I'm going to completely shoot my mouth off and get this all wrong, but there did seem to be this real competition at the time between, are we going to go with gasification? People were trying to work out, there's going to be some new vehicles. They are not going to be horses. And there was quite a few technologies, people were even building those gasification engines, and running them on, wood and, all kinds of crazy stuff right through the 20s, the 30s. It was almost like, until we got to the point, short version, I think, my suspicion is that I could never prove, but the way that the fossil fuel industry developed in conjunction with the engines that went with it, I do think that that's kind of what got that one over the line.
That would make sense. It's a highly monopolized supply chain, and then you want to sell it's like the printer ink. When you buy a cheap printer, but you're stuck paying for the ink. That's like an internal combustion engine vehicle, and I think you're probably right, Fiona, that it's the fossil fuel industry, definitely, it's a centralized energy source. They can control the entire supply chain compared to electricity, which is decentralized. So I think there's definitely an element of that. And I'm also, I was just going to say, I don't know the answer to this either, but another thing I was thinking about was that the war, the First World War, may have had a big influence as well, because these electric vehicles, they're fantastic for peacetime civilization where, you can drive in a city or whatever. But when you're at war, you need a transferable energy. And then maybe that got manufacturers started increasing their manufacturing of internal combustion engine, and then it just got carried away. That could be another factor playing into it. But it is tragic to think that the world was on a path to electric vehicles and then moved away from it, and now we're at 75 million internal combustion engines a year being birthed onto planet Earth. It's pretty wild.
More than 1 billion. It is crazy. Our collective cars weigh more than all mammalian life on Earth.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's 10 times as many, 10 times as many tons of cars as there are of mammals.
That's so sad.
Yeah, I know. I want to return to a world where there's more whales and roaming elephants than there are cars.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's a good excuse to shift to the economics of it. So, petrol's really bloody expensive. If you can, and I find it amazing. I think we've just socialized the idea that you spend $50 or $100 every week at the petrol station. For my American listeners, that's what we call gasoline. But if you convert it to a cost per kilometre in an average size ute or truck or car, it's 20 to 25 cents a kilometre to drive with petrol. I just did a trip to Noosa from Wollongong and back, so about 2,500 kilometres in an EV. The first 400 kilometres cost me 0.8 cents per kilometre because I was off my rooftop solar.
Wow.
Even off the grid, it's only about, I think 5 or 6 cents a kilometre, and even at the fast charging stations, it's sort of 10-ish cents, half the price. So the economics are now extraordinary. Talk to us about how those economics played out, or did you just went for performance, or did you also go for economics in the coal miners driving Tesla days?
The economics was always a big factor, knowing that you can run these vehicles much cheaper, but the brute force and the opportunity to smoke BMWs at the traffic lights was definitely a big factor as well. But yeah, I mean, it is fascinating that more people don't look at the economics of it. I mean, like, how many people get
the only thing
excited?
I like smoking more than a BMW is a G-Wagon. For some reason, the G-Wagons piss me off the most. Okay. Beating them really feels good.
Yeah.
You better explain what a G-Wagon is, Saul.
Oh, they're the really wanky Mercedes four-wheel drives.
Ah, yes.
Oh, we don't have them where I live.
The very unaerodynamic ones.
Yeah, there's not many in the Wollongong, but when you're in Sydney, they all seem to want to prove to you how loud and fast they are, and it's really nice to smoke them in an EV.
It's fascinating that people keep buying these cars, but how many people get excited about saving 1 or 2 cents off their petrol price, right? And they drive out of their way to a petrol station to get a couple of cents off, but yet won't convert to an EV where you get 80% off your energy cost, essentially.
Wow, that is wild to think that. Yeah, why are we bad at doing day-to-day economics like that?
Transport energy efficiency is important for passenger vehicles and it's important for families, but where is it even more important? It's in the transport sector. It's in the transport industry, where don't want to jump the gun and get into trucking too early, but
no, let's go there. All right, so
yeah?
just we're trying to pretend that Dan is a completely unbiased observer of the electric vehicle world, but he's recently gone from activist to capitalist pig in his effort to become a magnate of the electric trucking industry. So I think this is an amazing change in your personal journey to go from, ratbag being arrested to trying to pioneer a new way of trucking better. So, how did you make that decision?
Well, I guess it's felt compelled to do it because of all the experiences that I've had over the last few years, including hanging out with you, Saul, and learning about the efficiency gains of everything that's electric. And I was writing about it a lot for The Driven and seeing these huge opportunities that are out there, and wondering why no one else is doing this and taking advantage of it. And so just over 12 months ago, I teamed up with a guy named Fredrik Persson. He's a Swedish guy who's the former head of innovation for Scania Trucks, which is a global giant truck manufacturer. They have around 50,000 employees, and their trucks are over 100 countries around the world. I think they're the second or third largest seller of heavy trucks in Australia. And Fredrik was the head of innovation for around 5 years, and he was involved in a number of heavy electric trucking pilot programs in Sweden, and just has incredible experience there. And so Fredrik and I were consulting at the start of last year, and we were starting to talk to some trucking companies about the huge opportunities in electrification, with mixed results, I guess. And some trucking companies were very hesitant, or they would talk about hydrogen or biofuels. And then we both just decided, well, if these guys don't want to do it, let's start our own trucking company and start leveraging what we've just been talking about, which is low cost energy. And we decided to get into the heavy trucking space because that's where the most energy is used, and that's where you can leverage electrification the most. So and I'm relatively new to the road freight sector, and I've learned a hell of a lot from my business partner who's been doing it his whole career. But if you look at the different segments, you've got like your last mile delivery, metropolitan kind of freight, and these are your rigid trucks, they're called. They're doing around 100 kilometers a day, moving 5 tons thereabouts. And in those type of operations, they are the wage cost, the driver wage cost is the biggest component, and the energy cost of the diesel is relatively small. But then when you look at the heavy freight, which is your single combinations, A doubles, B doubles.
In the US, they call them 18-wheelers, but of course our A doubles and B doubles may have 26 or even more wheels, right?
That's right. We actually have some of the heaviest road freight in the world. So we're the second most road freight dependent country in the world after the US, but the size of our trucks are much bigger or heavier than even the US. And this is something Frederick talks about quite a lot. We have much heavier combinations, and these are doing huge amounts of volume of freight between major cities, like between Sydney and Melbourne or Sydney and Brisbane. There's around 3,500 heavy trucks that are on the Hume Highway between Sydney and Melbourne every day. So this is how all the stuff that, all of our food in our supermarkets, all the building materials, everything, it's going through this incredibly impressive, complex, heavy road freight network.
I didn't mean to throw you. So come back to that point. So on these heavier ones, you were saying the cost of the driver is low compared to the cost of the energy.
That's right. So to give you an idea, a 64-ton B double, and for your listeners, a B double is a two. So you basically got the prime mover, and it's pulling two trailers. So a 64-ton B double, doing 200,000 kilometres a year up and down the Hume Highway, will burn through over $2 million of diesel in 10 years. That's one truck, right? So you buy the truck for $250,000, and then you spend $2 million on energy to power that truck up and down the Hume. Now, this is happening for thousands and thousands of trucks. There's over 100,000, 150,000 trucks in Australia. And so in that high productivity segment, diesel makes up 40% of the cost structure, right? And these trucking companies are putting enormous effort into shaving, a fraction of a percentage off that. And the very, very good ones, the very good trucking companies, are obsessive with how they manage diesel costs, and they work on the aerodynamics of the truck, even the color of the trailer to try to reduce the heat for refrigerated trailers, all that kind of stuff. So then you come along with electrification, and you say, well, if you can get the electricity cost down, you can actually take a huge chunk of that cost out of trucking. So heavy trucks make up 3% of all those vehicles, but they account for 80% of the ton kilometers. Now, ton kilometer is how many tons per ton kilometers you're shifting. So there's this tiny number of vehicles out there that are responsible for moving like 80% of our stuff around. And if we just electrify those or focus on those, not only can we rapidly decarbonize a big chunk of the transport sector, we can also reduce the cost of the transport sector significantly. And to the point you're alluding to, Saul, we can do it with energy that's produced here in Australia locally. Because at the moment, we import around 30 billion litres of diesel per year in Australia, and 90% of that is coming is imported. So our entire road freight system is dependent on a handful of shipping lanes that are delivering 90% of our transport energy into the country. And then you say, well, what happens? Let's look at the risks. What happens if those supply chains, the oil supply chains, get cut or restricted? Well, that almost happened a couple of months ago with the Strait of Hormuz in the Middle East, and there was projections that could actually decrease the supply of oil by 20% or something. So our entire road freight system, which includes our food supply chain, is deeply dependent on these factors that are out of our control. But by electrifying and moving to on-site solar or just renewable energy that's generated here in Australia, we can create a much more resilient road freight system and protect ourselves against what's happening in other parts of the world.
It's so interesting, hey, and it's making me think all the way back to your initial story of your parents having a diesel supply, company. And I'm presume that they would have done deliveries to remote farms and things, to kind of, I'm going to make the most tenuous link here ever, but I'm kind of wondering, do people that are living in remote areas now, are they thinking to themselves, instead of paying to get the diesel shipped to me, which costs diesel, and then putting it in a big tank on my farm, which I then need to look after, which is obviously a safety risk, et cetera, are they thinking, would it be quite good to actually just generate all of the power that I need? I've got a lot of space, I've got a lot of sun, I sort of see some parallels there with that, and it's like having your own personal sovereignty over your fuel. I don't know. Is
Absolutely.
that kind of happening, or am I dreaming?
Well, I don't think it's happening, but it should be, and I'm not sure if they're thinking that, but they should be thinking that, because like if you want to protect yourself,
You won over the coal miners, mate. Surely you can win over the Nationals with this story.
yeah. Well, maybe one day we'll get Barnaby Joyce into one of these trucks for a follow-up series. But I think like think about the journey that a litre of diesel that ends up being used in a harvester in Central Queensland. Think of the journey that it goes on. It comes out of an oil well in the Middle East that's protected by whatever military army. So it comes out there. It goes. It's transported to a refinery. It's refined. It's then transported again. It's stored in tanks, and then by the time it hits Australia, it then again gets stored in tanks and then has to get shipped out to the petrol stations, distribution centers, and it's just like such a complex journey that involves so many factors along the way. Whereas if you're a farmer and you've got the space to put some solar down and charge your own electric trucks or electric farm vehicles, that makes so much more sense. And you're also protecting yourself against the volatility of the oil market as well. So it's another interesting thing is that the way freight works is that it has a diesel surcharge, and each month for each trucking company has its own diesel surcharge, and that changes each month, and it's a pass-through cost. So if you're a transport buyer like Coles or Woolies or Aldi or whoever, every month that freight price is moving. So when you try to project your costs out to the future, you have this caveat that you don't really know where the freight price is going to be because of the global volatility on the oil market.
One other efficiency that you just reminded me of that people forget about, takes 3 or 4% of the energy in petrol or gasoline is the energy required to refine it from raw crude oil. And another 6 or 7% of it is transporting it around the world or across countries to get to your vehicle. So fully,
really?
Yeah, something like 10%, or I think it's even higher, 10 or 12% of the global fossil fuel economy is just mining, refining, and moving those fossil fuels. It's huge inefficiency. So it actually means if you can achieve your goal of running our trucks on sunshine, not only do you eliminate those 160,000 litres a day or something, but or million litres a year, but
30 billion, sorry.
30 billion, but you get another 3 or 5 billion on top that were being used somewhere else to get it here.
That's right, and that's there's another point there, Saul, which you probably understand a bit better than me, is the efficiency rates of internal combustion engine themselves. So once you waste that energy, can you break that down? Because I think we talked about it a few years ago. But the efficiency of internal combustion compared to battery electric is just like...
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. So little tiny engines like your whippersnipper or your lawnmower, they're maybe 5 to 10% efficient. As you get into cars, there may be 18. A really, really efficient car engine might be 25, but 20 is typically a number, so you're losing 80% of your energy. As you get into bigger truck engines, they can get up to maybe 35, and because they're running closer to their optimum point more often. But that still means you're wasting 65-70% of the energy you're putting in the tank, whereas with an electric, you might lose 2 or 3 or 4% on the inverters and things that charge the battery, and then you might lose another. Most of these electric motors are super optimized to be about 95% efficient, so you can assume that they're only losing 10% compared to the 80% that you're losing, or 70 or 80% you're losing with petrol.
And to be clear, the loss for fossil fuel cars, the losses, that's heat predominantly, isn't it?
Yeah, this is why famously, South Africans and some people in rural Australia are like, I can cook an egg on my engine block. In fact, you used to put cast iron pots on top of the engine on road trips and cook a stew. That's just waste heat. And it's the funny thing with electric cars, of course. Like, there's so much heat in a petrol car that they just blow that heat into the car as the heater. But in the electric cars, there's no heat coming off anywhere, so you actually have to put in a little resistance heater. It's why you get a few less kilometers per kilowatt hour when you got the heat on than when you don't have the heat on.
So electric vehicles actually have to create inefficiency to create heating.
That's exactly right. It's
wild when you start to look at it at a systems level. That our, as you said, Saul, there's like 1.5 billion internal combustion engine vehicles on the roads around the world right now, and they're all dependent on a transport energy supply chain that is controlled by a handful of companies around the world.
So I'm imagining trucks that are electric trucks, and you're running them to do predominantly like servicing supermarkets, for instance. Is there a scenario where supermarkets, which are enormous and have giant roofs on them, where they can get some kind of deal with the trucking company that's like, we've got solar all over our roof, you can pull in and, I don't know, we will charge up your battery somewhat with whatever's left over after we've run our huge buildings? Or, is that kind of more of a distributed power system that you're thinking in this model, or is it more like we just charge them in one place?
It's a really good question. I think like whenever you have rooftop available, you should be utilizing it. So yes, there should be, these supermarkets should really be optimizing their roofs as much as they can, and you should be topping up there. But that said, the amount of energy required for these trucks, that would only make up a fraction of it. So we feel like the modeling that we've done, we've landed on like a more centralized, really high powered charging depot that does the bulk of the work, where we actually don't need to charge at destinations. So our customers don't need to put in that charging. That's not to say that they shouldn't. And if you can get a 20-minute top up or whatever end to end, then that's great. But being able to centralize that and optimize it and use on-site batteries, and then also to leverage the wholesale electricity market, where we have a huge, if you look at the wholesale electricity market each day, and for our listeners in the US, it's the same in California, probably other places, where the price per kilowatt hour drops significantly in the middle of the day when there's an abundance of solar coming on. So one of the analogies I use is like, imagine if the price of diesel dropped by 80% for 2 hours consistently every day, right? Everyone would go to the service station in those 2 hours and get 80% off their diesel. But imagine that in a trucking context. Well, you would buy like enormous tanks and stick them on your depot, and you would buy loads of diesel in those 2 hours, and then you would put it into your trucks, throughout the day. And that's the opportunity we have with electrification.
This is going to change the shift schedule. So we'll be driving more at night, charging when the electricity is nearly free.
Exactly. Like you could almost leverage the wholesale electricity market could influence freight pricing, time-dependent freight pricing. And then there's arbitrage options as well. And another interesting thing while we're on this topic is megawatt charging standard. So a lot of your listeners will be familiar with CCS, which is the standard charge port for passenger vehicles. There's a new standard coming out called the MCS, Megawatt Charging Standard, which is for trucks. And that is capable of charging in excess of 1,000 kilowatts. So it means you can charge one of these trucks in an hour or sometimes less than an hour.
Maybe we'll just do some quick napkin math to put this in perspective. If you got the home vehicle charger that just plugs into the wall, that's about a kilowatt or two. If you get the three-phase and you max it out, you might get 20 kilowatts. And then, the fast roadside chargers are 50 or 80, and the fastest ones are 150. And 150 kilowatt, I actually plugged into one the other day. I was so impressed. It charged my EV in about 25 minutes from 0 to 100. But if I have this megawatt, I'm going to be able to charge that in 6 minutes.
Probably.
Yeah.
How big's your battery?
80 kilowatt hours.
80 kilowatt hours. So these prime movers generally have batteries around 600 kilowatt hours. So let's say roughly eight times the size, and they're able to charge in about an hour.
Wow.
But one of the other like super exciting things about megawatt charging standard is that it comes with bi-directional capability as standard. Now, if you've got a truck that has 600 kilowatt hours, if you've got a fleet of 100 trucks, you effectively have 60 megawatt hours of battery capacity wrapped in wheels and truck. And your listeners would probably be familiar with the South Australian Big Battery, the one that was built in 2017. I think it got expanded, but when it was first built, it was the biggest battery in the world, and it was around 120 megawatt hours. So if you've got 100 600 kilowatt prime movers, you've effectively got half of a South Australian Big Battery.
And you said there's 3,000 a day on the Hume Highway, is that right?
There's 3,000 a day on the Hume. That's just the Hume, right? So then you've got the other 5 major freight corridors across Australia.
For our Americans, the Hume Highway is our Route 66.
Yes. Yeah, one of the densest freight... well, I think it used to be the densest flight corridor as well in the world, because you're going between these 2 major cities. But this is really exciting, is the opportunity with megawatt charging to run freight, as you said, Saul, in times where the electricity price is low, and then these trucks can park up and provide arbitrage or grid services when they're not operating as trucks. And so now you're seeing this integration of energy and transport in a really efficient, highly efficient way, which can also solve a lot of our grid problems.
The super nerdy way of saying this is that electrification couples the sectors.
Yes.
So
yes.
Well, couple my sectors. Hey, my question is, have you got...
I gotta finish laughing. Sorry.
Have you just gotten rid of air braking?
That's another huge benefit of electric trucks is there's no air brakes.
Jake's brake to those in the know.
That's actually huge.
I love that noise. I'm just going to say it. I don't like fossil fuels, but I do love the noise for Jake's brake.
There are microphones on the way down to Wollongong.
Bulleye Pass or down Mount Ousley.
Yeah.
Is that to check that you are using air brakes? Is that what they're there for?
Well, that would be what. No, we're Wollongong. We're very civilized. We're trying to make them quieter. Don't overuse it.
It's to stop trucks using them. But you're absolutely right, Fiona. This is another like massive advantage is the noise reduction of heavy electric trucks. When you first drive an electric truck or you drive in in the passenger seat or you see them, that's something that hits you straight away. Is like, wow, I'm in this huge big machine and it's not making any noise. You can hear the gravel crunching under the wheels, basically. But this also opens up opportunities for night deliveries. So at the moment, a lot of supermarkets, they're not allowed to deliver really late at night or early in the morning because certain local government areas have curfews on diesel trucks. This would enable potentially exemptions for electric trucks to go in and do those deliveries, which then takes them out of like peak hour demand as well, which reduces congestion on our roads. And then there's just the obvious one of pollution as well. So reducing local area pollution, local noise pollution around distribution centers, around major freight corridors. It's going to be a total game changer.
Yeah, there's cancer clusters around ports where trucks sit idling their diesel all day.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I imagine the maintenance on, just talking about air brakes, there's a lot of maintenance that's required on air brakes, for instance. But if you've got an electric truck, you've got essentially no gears, no air brakes. Like, surely that makes it a lot cheaper as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like physics don't change between passenger vehicles and heavy electric trucks.
The
laws of physics are the same, so it's the same deal. Less parts, less less waste.
All right, so I thought we were going to talk more about cars, but this is great. I have a soft spot for truck racing. Have you seen truck racing on television?
Yes.
It's just absolutely ridiculous. Things that shouldn't racing. Is when you lend me one of your electric trucks, Daniel, am I going to smoke everyone in the truck racing?
Might have to take traction control off so you can get
that's
sideways.
That's first thing I do in any electric vehicle.
Okay.
I want to go in one though. I don't know if I want to drive one, but just because although I do have an HT license, but I don't want to. I think I'd be I'd just like to go in one and hear it. It would be cool.
No, yeah. I want to drive it. I only drove a truck once. I drove a truck in Alaska because I was a hitchhiker and the guy who picked me up wanted to have a sleep. So he picks up a hitchhiker and is like, this is the road all the way through Alaska from the south to north. It's a straight line. There's one corner. He's like, when he sat me down, he's like, there's one corner. It's going to come up in about 2 hours. And he just let me drive his 15-speed truck. It was super exciting for the first 8 minutes as you go through all the 15 gears. Then it wasn't very interesting.
Until the corner.
Until the corner. I did change down gears for the corner. That was good. Yeah. But no, I'm looking forward to driving the electric truck.
I think the Tesla Semi apparently does 0 to 100 in like 5 seconds without a trailer. So
oh my god.
Oh, that's going to be great.
Yeah.
What about the Scania? Who's got the best electric truck in the world right now today?
Well, I probably can't speak too much about that, but I could.
You know the answer, you just don't want to say it.
There's so some interesting things around who's making what kind of electric trucks. So you've got some European OEMs that have been around for 100 years, like your Volvos, your Scanias, etc. And their production lines, they're still using the diesel truck architecture, and they're kind of retrofitting those, and so while they're great trucks, they're still not like ground up built trucks. Then you've got some new entrants like Windrose in China, and they've done a full ground up truck, and we've had a play with those, and that's a.
Are they the BYD of trucks?
Potentially. I mean, they're very they're still a startup, but they're very new and they haven't scaled production yet. And they've only been around for about 3 years, but they are starting to grow their production. The specs on their truck are pretty amazing. So they've got it's like a 729 kilowatt hour battery. They're not encumbered by the existing diesel kind of frame, so that means they get more battery and less weight. They've actually got less weight on the front axle, which is a big problem for a lot of trucks. And so the Windrose can do so it can do 1,000 kilometers with no trailer, so it can drive from Sydney to Melbourne on a single charge with a full trailer, like a 42-ton single combination. It'll do apparently do over 600 kilometers on one charge,
which is pretty much all you can drive on one shift, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. So again, like you couple this with megawatt charging, and all of a sudden the charging stops aren't your constraint. It's the
It's
regulations on having to stop. Your mandatory stopping requirements become the constraint.
It's probably obvious that I know nothing about electric trucks, but I'm imagining that the geometry of the trucks might be great for, or better than diesel ones, because you don't have a giant engine in the front. You can, presumably the batteries are spread flat, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. And there's some really interesting developments in technologies around what's called e-axles. And my co-founder Frederick would be much better placed to discuss that than me. But basically, with a diesel engine, you have the transmission and then like the drive shaft that goes. You're basically transmitting that force down to the rear drive wheels. With an e-axle, the motor's mounted in the rear axle, so you don't need all that. So all of a sudden, all that stuff's gone, and you've got a huge space for more batteries, and again, less moving parts, less maintenance. So it's approaching this from a first principles approach, where you're designing the truck from scratch, and that's
Instead
really
of
instead of retrofitting, yeah, and that's really what we're trying to do as well as a trucking company, is to approach this from ground up and say, how would you design a trucking company, an electric trucking company from scratch? And when you take that view, you make decisions quite differently about where the site's located, what the site looks like, how your operations are, all that kind of stuff.
When are we going to see you on the road?
Well, we have been kind of flying under the radar a bit for the last 12 months. We're getting our ducks in a row, but we're hoping to be on the roads in late 2026, early 2027 at this stage. It's the first project is a huge project, and there's a lot of moving parts, and we have a pretty incredible team that's working on it at the moment. And we've had amazing support from local politicians in the area, from the DNSP, the trucking companies have been very supportive. We've got
for those, DNSP is distribution service provider. They're the people who own the local poles and wires, provide the electricity. So tell me about that. I think DNSPs are critical in this energy transition. How are they a good partner for trucks?
Well, I think the DNSP that we've been working with, in Endeavour Energy, has been really positive about this project from a decarbonisation perspective. They're very excited about it, but also, as I mentioned earlier, this combination of energy and transport is going to present new opportunities for the way we manage the grid and the way we manage the enormous differential in energy. So I think they're incredibly excited about it as well. And again, it's about looking at this whole thing as a system rather than individual components. When you look at the whole system, you're able to optimize it in a much better way. So yeah, we've had a great relationship with the DNSP. We've also got several customers who we have MOUs with that we're about to do demonstration runs with in September as well. So there's a lot of momentum that's building around this now. So yeah, it's very exciting.
All right, so just to tie it back to the average punter. Hopefully there are a bunch of truck drivers listening to our show this week, but most of us experience of trucks are more of the ute variety. Are we really relying on a good ute to come along to save the planet? Is the F-150 Lightning it? Is it the Rivian? Is it the BYD Shark? Do we need Slate Auto, the new American startup making little sort of Hilux size EVs? Is that the thing that's going to really break the back of Australia's dependence on petrol?
That's a great question, and I hope that we do see more entrance into that market, because it's a massive market that's untapped at this stage, and you're starting to see more and more of the BYD Shark out there. So there's definitely an appetite for it, and whoever can nail that, there's a big opportunity. I personally would like to see less utes on the road overall, because I think a lot of them are driving around empty and unutilized, unutilized utes. I'm okay with utes that are being used as utes for people who need them, but if you're just driving it around empty 90% of the time, then maybe you could use something else.
You're speaking my language. I'm a van guy. I think 2 sliding doors on the side, a van. It's like a ute, but better with rain protection.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but I hope to see that. But again, I think the bigger opportunity with decarbonisation is not in the passenger vehicles. That still needs to happen, but in the long haul stuff, the stuff that's doing a lot of kilometres, a lot of weight, that I think has the potential to break the back of the oil industry if it really takes off. And
of course, you'll save the Australian government the $10 billion a year that they're given discounts.
That's right.
The worst subsidy in Australia is paying oil companies to make diesel cheaper.
Exactly. Yeah.
Last question, your own personal electrification journey. How electrified is your life?
It's quite electrified. So obviously the car, my wife and I live in a relatively older built apartment, which still has a gas stove. So apart from the gas stove, the hot water is electric. So it's just the gas stove, but it's on our to-do list. So like everyone saw, we're not perfect, but we're moving in the right direction.
I'm going to give you a pretty big discount if you clean up the Hume Highway for me, though.
Okay. That gets brownie points.
Credits.
Yeah.
It was terrific. Thank you so much, Daniel, for being here.
Great. Thanks very much, Saul and Fiona. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
The Shameless Plug is a podcast supported by Rewiring Australia and Rewiring America. It's hosted by me, Saul Griffith, and my mate, Fiona Whitelaw. Our producers are Kathleen Burrows and Caitlin Chang. You can read more about today's guest in my latest book, Plug In, The Electrification Handbook, available in all good bookstores. Rewiring Australia and Rewiring America advocate for climate action you can do today in your home and your community. Let's electrify everything.